The hollow projector hummed to life in the Imperial War Council chamber, casting a soft blue glow across the assembled Zyx'karian dignitaries. Lead xenobiologist Zertal adjusted her ceremonial throat frills and cleared all three of her throats. Esteemed members of the War Council, after extensive analysis of Earth's primary information network, something they call YouTube, we have compiled our comprehensive assessment of human combat capabilities. She gestured with her upper appendage, bringing up a video of what appeared to be a large enclosed habitat filled with creatures in colorful protective gear sliding across frozen water. Supreme Commander Rinks leaned forward on his hoverthrone, all 6 eyes narrowing. What manner of combat training is this? That's the fascinating part, Commander, Zertal said, her scales rippling with academic excitement. This isn't combat training at all. This is their most sacred winter ritual, something they call NHL. Our analysis suggests it's a mandatory cultural practice where humans gather in climate-controlled structures to watch others slide around on frozen water while holding curved sticks. The War Council chamber erupted in chittering laughter. Admiral Yergach actually fell off his perch. Observe, Zertal continued, forwarding to a new clip. When one of these players violates their strict sliding protocols, they're sent to this small chamber. The projection showed a human entering a clear box, sitting down and staring straight ahead. A timeout chamber for the weak, General Katex proclaimed, slapping all 4 knees with his lower hands. Virax, who had never lost a battle in his 300-cycle career, rose from his hover throne. Show me their actual military capabilities? Well, Zertal shifted uncomfortably. We found very little evidence of traditional military activity. They seem to spend most of their resources on these ritual encounters. Look, they even have specialized maintenance crews who smooth the ice between ceremonial periods using machines called zambonis. The projection showed more footage, humans celebrating something called a hat trick by throwing head coverings onto the ice, others engaging in brief ritual combat before being separated by officials in striped garments, and massive crowds chanting something about letting the boys play. What about these occasional physical altercations? Virax inquired, pointing to a fight between 2 players. Ah, yes, Zertal brightened. These are strictly ceremonial displays. Notice how they first discard their protective hand coverings. A clear sign of ritual posturing rather than actual combat. Our behavioral analysts believe this demonstrates the species' fundamental aversion to genuine violence. A junior xenobiologist, Dr. Pitak, stepped forward with another data tablet. We've also documented their most revered cultural artifact, the Stanley Cup. Humans appear to worship this metallic vessel, but then bizarrely fill it with fermented grain liquid and drink from it. Some even put their offspring inside it. Most peculiar, Virax mused, stroking his ceremonial chin spikes. And you're certain these findings are representative of their entire species? Oh, absolutely, Zertran assured him. They're particularly devoted to these rituals in regions called Canada and Minnesota. The humans there seem physically incapable of going more than a few solar rotations without gathering to observe these ceremonies. Virax rose to his full height, his scales gleaming under the chamber's lights. Then the path forward is clear. We shall launch our invasion during their next major ritual gathering. Their primitive ice-sliding skills will be no match for our quantum phase battlecruisers. There is one curious detail, Dr. Patak interjected. They have this peculiar saying, hockey players are just built different. He paused, consulting his notes. But given their obvious fixation on sliding around in enclosed spaces, we've concluded it's merely a reference to their strange need for protective equipment and ritual face paint. Excellent work, all of you, Virax declared. Mark my words, this will be the easiest conquest in Imperial history. Now, someone explain to me again why they call it a 5-hole when there are clearly 6 openings in their goal nets. As the War Council dissolved into another round of chittering laughter, none of them noticed Dr. Patak's final notation, addendum, unable to determine significance of phrase, don't poke the bear. Presumably relates to Earth's ursine wildlife rather than hockey culture. They would learn. Oh, how they would learn. Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals was shaping up to be a classic Montreal-Minnesota grudge match when the first Zyx'karian warship appeared through the clouds above the Montreal Forum. The massive vessel, shaped like a twisted hexagon, cast strange shadows across the arena's iconic facade. Inside, play stopped momentarily as the building trembled. The referee skated to center ice, raised his whistle, and made the official call. 2-minute delay of game penalty against, the giant spaceship. Up in the commentary box, veteran announcer Pierre Maguire barely missed a beat. You know, Bob, I had the pleasure of interviewing an alien invasion force back in junior hockey. Tremendous work ethic, great in the corners. Outside the forum, thousands of fans gathered in the streets, many still clutching their beers and poutine. The first alien dropship landed in a swirl of snow and steam, its sleek design somehow managing to look both threatening and like a rejected Tampa Bay Lightning alternate jersey. This has got to be Gary Bettman's doing, muttered Jean-Luc, the hammer, Bergeron, adjusting his vintage Canadiens jersey over his still impressive frame. The retired enforcer had been enjoying a quiet retirement. Well, as quiet as possible for someone who'd spent 15 years as the most feared man on ice. Until tonight. Alien troops began descending from the ship's ramp, their armor glinting under the streetlights. The crowd responded with a chorus of boos, as is tradition. Worst marketing stunt ever, someone in a wild jersey complained, snapping pictures on his phone. First the Golden Knights pre-game show, now this. Supreme Commander Rinks emerged last, his hover throne humming softly. He raised all four arms in what his cultural advisors had assured him was a threatening gesture. The crowd responded with polite golf claps, assuming this was between periods entertainment. Humans, Rinks' voice boomed through his translator. We have come to... Is that processed protein covered in coagulated milk solids and meat juice? He was pointing at Morris's famous poutine cart, where the elderly vendor had served forum crowds for 30 years. Oui, Monsieur Alien, Maurice replied, utterly unfazed. Best poutine in Montreal. Want some? Rinks floated closer, genuinely curious. One of his soldiers, Lieutenant Zyx'karian, moved to stop him, and in doing so knocked into the cart. The precious poutine went flying, gravy and cheese curds splattering across the snow. The crowd went silent. Morris's grandson, witnessing this from the cart, made the universal gesture for, somebody gonna get it. Jean-Luc, the hammer, Bergeron cracked his neck. 20 years of muscle memory kicked in. Hey, bud, he called out to the alien soldier, his voice carrying that special hockey enforcer tone that translates across all languages as, you done messed up. You can't do that. Lieutenant Zyx'karian turned, confused by the lack of terror in the human's voice. Our cultural research indicates you are a passive species who... The hip check caught him mid-sentence. It was textbook perfect, the kind they teach in Canadian hockey schools, right after learning the national anthem and before advanced Tim Hortons ordering. The alien went airborne, his trajectory describing a beautiful arc before he landed in a convenient snowbank. The crowd erupted in cheers. Someone started the ole, 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 ole chant. Did that human just body check Lieutenant Zyx'karian? Rinks asked nobody in particular, his translator struggling with the concept. 2 minutes for charging, shouted a helpful fan. Back inside the forum, word of what happened spread quickly. The NHL Commissioner's Office immediately issued a statement. While we cannot officially condone the checking of alien invaders, we remind all extraterrestrial species that playoff hockey is a contact sport. In Minnesota, watching the scene unfold on the Jumbotron, the Wild's coach turned to his bench. Boys, he said gravely, get your game faces on. Looks like we're playing for more than just the cup now. Back outside, Jean-Luc helped the dazed alien lieutenant up, as is proper hockey etiquette, and even offered him some mostly clean snow to wipe his face. Welcome to Earth, bud. First lessons free. Supreme Commander Rinks, watching this unfold, felt the first twinge of doubt in his 300-cycle military career. None of the briefings had mentioned anything about humans being able to hit like that. The first major discovery about human combat capabilities came when squad leader Peak Teak, attempted to subdue a group of recreational players outside a Minneapolis community center. His after-action report, transmitted through heavily damaged armor, read simply, "Composite alloy plating no match for composite stick technology, requesting immediate extraction and ice pack." The Zyx'karian military engineers were baffled. Their armor could withstand plasma bolts, yet somehow these primitive curved implements, apparently constructed by companies called Bauer and CCM, were leaving dents. Most concerning were the ones labeled Sherwood, which several soldiers insisted were imbued with dark magic. "It doesn't make tactical sense," Lieutenant Zyx'karian complained to Supreme Commander Rinks, nursing a bruised thorax. "They aim for completely inefficient target zones. One of them kept yelling, 'Two-hand him,' and striking my upper appendages." Rinks, watching surveillance footage of another failed containment attempt, had begun to develop a nervous tic in his left eye cluster. "And what about these rolling ice modification vehicles?" The footage showed a formation of zambonis advancing on a Zyx'karian position in St. Paul. The aliens had initially ignored them, assuming they were simply performing their usual ice-smoothing ritual. This proved to be a tactical error, especially since the Minnesotans had somehow modified the zambonis' water tanks to spray high-pressure slush. "Sir," a communications officer burst into the command center. "We've lost contact with Shuttle Delta 7, the one conducting reconnaissance over Saskatchewan." "Yes, sir. Last transmission mentioned something about Beauty League and wait till the boys hear about this at Romeo's Pizza after the game." The shuttle, as it turned out, had been hijacked by the Thursday Night Beer League from Moose Jaw. The players had simply tossed their equipment bags into the shuttle's gravity drive, causing catastrophic systems failure through what they later described as "greasy dangles, boys." When questioned about their tactics, team captain Dave Duster McDougal shrugged. "Figured if it works against the Swift Current boys, might work against aliens." The aliens were particularly troubled by humanity's apparent mastery of blade-enhanced combat. During what became known as the Battle of Lake of the Woods, a squadron of Zyx'karian troops watched in horror as a high school hockey team executed perfect crossovers while firing slap shots at their position. "How do they balance?" became a common cry among alien forces. Yet nothing prepared the invasion force for what awaited them in Thunder Bay. The Thunder Bay North Stars junior team, drawing on decades of hockey wisdom and several questionable penalty calls, turned their entire rink into an elaborate trap. Head coach Bill Old-Time Hockey Wilson had seen enough bench-clearing brawls to know a thing or two about home ice advantage. The aliens, responding to what they thought was a surrender message, entered the arena to find it apparently deserted. As they moved toward center ice, Coach Wilson's voice came over the PA system. "Drop the puck, boys." The trap was sprung. The boards, freshly greased with hockey tape residue and what might have been maple syrup, proved impossible for alien troops to grab. Every exit except one was blocked by strategically placed nets and what appeared to be the entire contents of the team's equipment room. "What's that smell?" one alien soldier asked moments before the truth hit him. They'd entered a zone defense perfected by generations of Canadian junior hockey. The North Stars emerged from the penalty boxes, moving with the practiced precision of a power play unit. The aliens found themselves herded toward the neutral zone, where they discovered another unpleasant surprise. The blue lines had been replaced with tiny trenches filled with zamboni slush. "Remember, boys," Coach Wilson had told his team, "just like we practiced. Except instead of the Sudbury power play, it's an alien invasion." The final stroke of genius came from equipment manager Randy "Stick" Stevenson, who had spent 40 years dealing with teenagers trying to sneak illegal curves past referees. He'd modified the goal nets with a prototype mesh he'd been saving for playoffs, a hybrid of carbon fiber and what he would only describe as pure Canadian know-how. When the aliens attempted to teleport out, they found their signals scrambled by what their sensors insisted was an impossible combination of hockey tape residue, Tim Hortons coffee, and pure teenage hockey player determination. Supreme Commander Rinks received the report of the Thunder Bay incident with all 6 eyes closed, massaging his temple ridges. "Let me understand this correctly," he said to his increasingly nervous staff. "An entire platoon of our most elite troops captured, sir." by adolescent humans. Yes, sir. Using nothing but hockey equipment. And some very creative interpretations of the neutral zone trap, sir. Zyx'karian opened his eyes to find his tactical display showing yet another concerning development. Across Earth's northern regions, more rinks were being converted into defensive positions. In Manitoba, 3 beer leagues had somehow mounted old goalie masks onto surplus Soviet tanks. Wisconsin reported its entire high school hockey program was now conducting guerrilla warfare training disguised as power skating drills. Most worrying was the intelligence from Minnesota's Iron Range region, where several small towns had apparently been preparing for this exact scenario since 1980. Miracle on ice. Sir, his cultural affairs officer interjected, we've intercepted what appears to be a critical human military transmission. They keep repeating this phrase, wheel, snipe, celly. And what, Zyx'karian asked, dreading the answer, does it mean? Our linguists are divided, but it appears to be some sort of battle cry, often accompanied by something called a bar-down clapper. Zyx'karian stared at the tactical display, watching more and more hockey rinks transform into resistance centers. His invasion force, the pride of the Zyx'karian Empire, was being systematically dismantled by humans whose primary combat training appeared to be something called Bantam League. Perhaps, he said slowly, we should reconsider our assessment of human combat capabilities. At that moment, another report came in. A men's league team from Red Deer had just captured their 4th alien scout ship. They'd celebrated by instinctively throwing their gloves and sticks onto the landing pad. The humans, it seemed, were just getting warmed up, and somewhere in Thunder Bay, Coach Wilson was telling his team, boys, I've been saving this power play strategy since 1987. Time to show these aliens some real connection. Supreme Commander Zyx'karian stood before the United Nations Security Council, expecting to finally face Earth's real military leadership. His scales had lost their usual luster, and his hover throne listed slightly to the left, the result of an unfortunate encounter with what humans called a Gordie Howe hat trick. Surely now, he addressed the assembled delegates, you will deploy your actual combat forces? We've observed your conventional military capabilities. You have nuclear weapons, tanks, aircraft carriers. You can't mean to continue this hockey-based resistance. The U.S. Secretary of Defense cleared her throat. Actually, Commander, we've been consulting with our strategic partners and we've decided to, well, let the boys play. What? The NHL Players Association has been officially deputized as Earth's primary defense force, she continued, sliding a document across the table. We're calling it Operation Blue Line. Zyx'karian's translator struggled to process this. But they're just sports entertainers. A Canadian general actually laughed. Clearly you've never been to a Flames Oilers game. The document outlined Earth's new defense strategy. The NHL's Department of Player Safety would coordinate global military operations. All alien incursions would be reviewed by the Situation Room in Toronto. And most worryingly, every hockey player on Earth, from the NHL down to beer leagues, was now technically a deputy of Earth's combined defense forces. This is absurd, Zyx'karian protested. Your hockey players can't possibly... He was interrupted by his tactical officer bursting into the chamber. Sir, we've intercepted what appears to be decades of classified human military broadcasts. The officer activated a portable holo projector. The image showed a human male in what appeared to be ceremonial battle garb, a suit that violated several laws of optical physics. Listen up, you people! Don Cherry's distinctive voice filled the chamber. I'm going to tell you about proper Canadian values and how to play the game right. The delegates watched with barely concealed amusement as Zyx'karian and his officers became increasingly entranced by Cherry's decades of coach's corner rants. The aliens furiously took notes as Cherry expounded on everything from the proper way to finish checks to why European players don't block enough shots. The suits, Zyx'karian whispered, his eyes fixed on a particularly explosive floral pattern. They must contain some form of power we don't understand. Look how he emphasizes key tactical points by adjusting his collar. His cultural officer was already drafting a report. Humans channel combat energy through elaborate garment-based rituals. Effectiveness appears to correlate directly with pattern intensity and collar stiffness. And this tactician, Zyx'karian continued, he speaks of something called good Ontario boys with such reverence. They must be some kind of elite fighting force. The UN delegates exchanged glances. The Canadian ambassador briefly considered explaining, then decided some things were better left mysterious. The aliens' misunderstanding reached new heights when they discovered Ron McLean's puns. Their language contains combat algorithms disguised as wordplay, Vero declared. Brilliant! Within hours, the Zyx'karian command staff had begun implementing what they believed to be classified human military protocols. Alien officers appeared wearing suits that made Don Cherries look subtle. They attempted to explain tactical maneuvers using random blue screens and telestrator drawings. Several began ending their reports with tortured hockey puns. The final straw came when Zyx'karian discovered Cherry's infamous Rock'em Sock'em video series. These, he announced to his staff, are clearly their most classified combat training videos. Look how they've disguised them as simple entertainment. Earth's actual military leaders, watching the aliens descend into Cherry-induced confusion, couldn't believe their luck. The Pentagon's after-action report would later note, enemy forces became convinced that Hockey Night in Canada was an encrypted military broadcast. Morale suffered significantly when they attempted to incorporate Don Cherry's fashion sense into their combat protocols. The NHL, meanwhile, was having the time of its life. The Players Association immediately issued new military-grade hockey sticks. The Department of Player Safety began reviewing alien combat maneuvers for supplementary discipline, and every team's enforcer was officially designated a strategic defense asset. Zyx'karian made one final attempt to understand his enemy. But what about your actual military commanders? Surely they don't defer to hockey players? The U.S. Secretary of Defense smiled. Commander, let me tell you about the time the Russian national team played the Philadelphia Flyers. As she told the story, Zyx'karian's color gradually shifted from confident purple to concerned mauve. His tactical officer, wearing a suit that could be seen from orbit, leaned over and whispered, Sir, I believe we may have miscalculated. How so? Well, sir, we thought we were invading a planet of peaceful sports enthusiasts. And instead, we appear to have invaded a planet where millions of people voluntarily play a sport that's basically ice-based combat, for fun. Zyx'karian looked around the chamber. Every human was wearing the slight smile of someone who knows exactly how many penalty minutes their local team racked up last season. Perhaps, he said carefully, we should review our strategic options. Good idea, sir, his officer replied. But first, what do you think about this suit? I believe the humans call this pattern Calgary Stampede Chic. The wind howled across downtown Winnipeg, driving snow sideways through the streets. Local meteorologists called it a bit brisk. Everyone else called it perfect hockey weather. Supreme Commander Zyx'karian's forces had assembled at Portage and Maine, historically known as the coldest and windiest intersection in North America. They'd come prepared, or so they thought. Each alien soldier wore no fewer than 6 Don Cherry-inspired suits, layered like tactical armor. Their quantum rifles had been modified with hockey tape for better grip. Remember your training, Zyx'karian called out, his own outfit a blindingly awful combination of plaid, paisley, and what appeared to be actual curtain material. Deploy in the formation we learned from the sacred Rock'em Sock'em texts. The aliens arranged themselves in what they believed was a power play formation. Several wore goalie masks backwards. One particularly confused lieutenant had attached skate blades directly to his hover boots. Across the intersection, Earth's defenders waited. The combined forces of every beer league in Manitoba stood ready, their jerseys a mismatched rainbow of sponsor logos and questionable team names like Mighty Puckers and Ice Holes. Look at that form, muttered Dave from accounting, team captain of the Thursday night Beauty League champions. They're not even dressed for the weather. Indeed, despite their multiple suits, the aliens were shivering. They'd failed to account for the most basic principle of Winnipeg winter warfare: layer properly and always. Always wear a toque. The battle began when an alien lieutenant attempted what he thought was an intimidation display, firing his quantum rifle into the air while shouting, "Good Ontario boy!" in badly accented English. A referee materialized from nowhere, whistle already in mouth. 2 minutes for unsportsmanlike conduct. But this is war, the alien protested. Game's gotta be played right, the ref replied, unmoved. Get in the box. The aliens' confusion only grew as more penalties were called. Illegal equipment for their modified hover boots, too many tentacles on the ice, and one particularly harsh game misconduct for what the officials called making a mockery of Don Cherry's legacy with their mismatched suits. That's when the humans struck. It started with a simple dump and chase, except the puck was an alien communications device, and chase involved 3 former Junior B players and a zamboni. The aliens' formation collapsed immediately, their multiple suits restricting movement like rookie players wearing their first shoulder pads. "Time to show them some proper Manitoba hockey," Dave called out. His beer league teammates nodded grimly, years of late-night games and post-game beers having prepared them for exactly this moment. What followed was a clinic in Canadian hockey. The aliens, despite their advanced technology, had no defense against a perfectly executed neutral zone trap. 40 years of beer league experience in the form of accidentally dropped gloves. The devastating psychological warfare of being chirped in 3 different prairie accents. Something the humans called going top cheddar where mama keeps the cookie jar. Vivek watched in horror as his troops fell, one by one, to deeks that shouldn't have been physically possible. His tactical officer, wearing what might have been an entire curtain store, reported increasing confusion among their forces. "Sir, they're not following any recognizable combat doctrine." "What are they doing?" Zyx'karian demanded. "They keep yelling for the boys, and sir, I think they're celebrating each hit with something called a celly." The end came swiftly. Dave's beer league team, supported by 3 other teams they usually fought with at Romeo's Pizza, executed a perfect flying V formation, but unlike the movie version, this one involved significantly more checking. The aliens never stood a chance. Their suits, layered for what they thought was maximum power, only made them easier targets. The formation broke against the Canadian defense like a rookie trying to fight Bob Probert. "This is impossible," Zyx'karian cried as his hover throne was neatly stick-checked into a snowbank. "We studied your combat footage." "Yeah, bud," Dave replied, helping the alien commander up as is tradition. "But you forgot the first rule of hockey in Winnipeg." "Which is?" "The game's only half the fun. The real magic happens when you're just letting the boys play." The remaining aliens, those who could still move in their multiple suits, began an orderly retreat. Their after-action report would note only, "Humans too strong, winter too cold, suits not enough. P.S. Does anyone know where we can get proper toques?" And that's how the Great Hockey War ended, not with a bang, but with a beauty of a dangle and a textbook hip check. Dave's team celebrated the only way they knew how, beers at Romeo's, where they added "saved Earth from alien invasion" to their usual post-game analysis. The aliens were even invited, after they changed into more reasonable attire, of course. The treaty negotiations were held, appropriately enough, in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Supreme Commander Rinks, sporting a more reasonable 2 suits instead of his previous 6, signed the surrender documents with a hockey stick pen, a gift from the NHL commissioner. "We request only one condition for our surrender," Rinks announced, adjusting his now regulation tie. "The Zyx'karian Empire would like to submit an application for NHL expansion." The humans, to their credit, managed to keep straight faces, mostly. "We'll need to review your junior development program," the commissioner replied, "and you'll have to address your team's salary cap situation. Those quantum weapons count against the cap, you know." The resulting peace treaty established the NHL's new intergalactic division, though there were some initial growing pains. The alien team struggled mightily with concepts like icing. "But why can't we just teleport the puck?" and "offside. We have 6 legs, which one determines the zone entry?" Rinks himself became an unlikely hockey ambassador, falling in love with the sport he'd once dismissed as ritual ice sliding. He became a passionate Phoenix Coyotes fan, telling anyone who would listen that watching hockey in the desert is still less bizarre than what happened in Winnipeg that day. The NHL's Department of Player Safety had to create an entirely new review process for tentacle infractions. The rulebook was amended to specify that telekinetic puck control was, in fact, goalie interference. But the real success story was the mandatory hockey development program for alien youth. Young Zyx'karians took to the sport with surprising enthusiasm, though their parents were initially concerned about the violence. "You want our children to willingly engage in ice-based combat?" they asked. "That's exactly what got us into this mess." The program's first graduate, rookie sensation Zyx'karian, made headlines when he scored his first NHL goal for the newly formed Saturn Ring Raiders. He celebrated by attempting a traditional human celly, though his multiple legs made the skating motion somewhat complicated. In his next game, Ziggy received his first penalty for slashing. As he skated to the box, his teammates showed their support in traditional Zyx'karian fashion by detaching their ceremonial tentacles and tossing them onto the ice. The refs, naturally, called a delay of game penalty. "Worth it," Ziggy said in the post-game interview, proudly sporting a black eye and what might have been Don Cherry's original 1977 suit jacket. "The boys were just letting me play." And so, what began as an invasion ended as the greatest expansion of hockey culture in history. The game grew, adapted, and somehow became even more bizarre, which, as any hockey fan will tell you, is exactly how it should be. Though Earth did have to add one final rule to the official NHL rulebook: no quantum-enhanced hockey tape allowed. Some things, after all, are sacred.